The challenge begins. The twin suns of Varkesh burned high in the sky, pouring golden light over the red stone arena. The crowd roared like a storm. Thousands of alien warriors gathered to see the outsider's trial. Ethan Cross, the only human on this planet, stood at the center, his boots sinking slightly into the dusty ground. He could feel the heat pressing against his skin. But it was not the suns that made his heart race. It was the weight of every eye watching him, waiting for him to fail. Across from him stood Varakai, the high warchief of the Korath. She was taller than any human he had ever met, her body built with hard muscle, her black armor engraved with silver marks of victory, her golden eyes locked onto his with the sharpness of a blade. In her hands she held the war mace of the ancestors, a weapon forged from the heart of a meteor. Its head was massive, dark metal, etched with runes that glowed faintly as if alive. No outsider had ever lifted it, not without their arms buckling and the weapon crashing to the ground. Tradition said it was impossible. The crowd's voices swelled, chanting words in the alien tongue, some filled with excitement, others with mockery. Ethan didn't understand their language, but he understood the tone. They were certain he was about to embarrass himself. Varakai's expression was unreadable, but her tone was sharp when she spoke. "By the law of the Korath, you accept the challenge," she said, her deep voice carrying over the crowd. Ethan nodded, trying not to show the knot tightening in his stomach. The war mace was said to be as heavy as 10 men, and even stronger warriors than him had dropped it in seconds. He didn't care. He wasn't here for glory. He was here because someone had told him he couldn't do it. And Ethan Cross never walked away from that kind of dare. Varakai stepped closer, the ground seeming to shake under her boots. She held out the mace with one hand, the runes pulsing as if sensing a new challenger. Ethan wrapped both hands around the weapon's grip. The moment his fingers touched the cold metal, a strange vibration shot through his arms. It was like the weapon was alive, testing him. His shoulders tensed. His grip tightened. Varakai released her hold. The mace's weight hit him like a falling boulder. His knees bent. His arms screamed in protest. But he locked his elbows and planted his feet. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ethan felt sweat break across his forehead. Every muscle burned, but he didn't let go. He took one slow breath, then another. The weapon was heavy, unbearably heavy, but his stubbornness was heavier still. Varakai's golden eyes narrowed. Perhaps for the first time in years, she looked surprised. The crowd grew restless. Shouts rising, some cheering for him, others demanding he be tested further. The warchief raised one hand, and the noise fell silent. "You carry it," she said. "Then you face the trial." Ethan didn't ask what the trial was. He had a feeling he wouldn't like the answer. Two massive gates at the far end of the arena began to rise with a grinding of chains. A wave of hot, foul air rolled out, carrying the smell of something alive and dangerous. The shadows beyond the gates shifted, and a deep growl rumbled from within. Ethan tightened his grip on the mace, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. The crowd began chanting again, louder, faster. He couldn't understand their words, but he knew what they wanted. They wanted blood. The gates clanged fully open, revealing a massive beast with scales the color of molten rock. Its 4 eyes glowed like embers, its jaws lined with teeth as long as Ethan's hand. The creature stepped forward, each footfall shaking the arena floor. Varakai's voice rang out over the noise. "Survive, and you will have earned the right to hold the mace." Ethan swallowed, the weapon feeling heavier than ever in his hands. This was no simple test of strength. This was survival. The beast roared, charging with terrifying speed. Ethan braced himself, the mace held low at his side. For 1 second, he wondered if the alien crowd was right, if this was the moment he would fail. But then a spark of defiance burned in his chest. He wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. If he was going down, he was going down swinging. As the creature lunged, Ethan stepped forward instead of back. The mace swung upward with all the power his body could give. Metal met bone with a crack that echoed across the arena. The beast staggered, surprised by the force. The crowd erupted into wild noise. Varakai's lips curved into the smallest hint of a smile. Maybe, just maybe, this human was not like the others. Trial of strength. The arena floor was still shaking from the beast's roar, but Ethan stood with the war mace in his hands, his breath heavy yet steady. The crowd was no longer only mocking. Now there was a strange mix of curiosity and excitement in their voices. Varakai, standing high on the stone platform, gave a signal with her hand. From behind her, 2 more gates began to grind open. The sound of chains rattling through the air. Ethan kept his eyes fixed on them. Knowing this was only the beginning, the first beast had been a test of speed and reaction. What came next would test his strength until his body had nothing left to give. From one gate emerged a massive, horned creature with thick, armored skin, its nostrils releasing clouds of steam. From the other came a lean, 4-legged predator with black fur and eyes that glowed green in the shadows. The crowd's chanting grew louder, the beat of their fists against the stone echoing like war drums. Ethan tightened his grip on the mace. His arms already ached from holding its weight, but he refused to let that thought control him. He remembered his training back on Earth, not the military drills, but the moments when everything hurt, and you still had to keep going. Pain was temporary, but quitting lasted forever. He would not be the human who dropped the mace. The horned beast charged first, its bulk like a living wall of muscle and stone. Ethan sidestepped, letting the creature's own momentum carry it past him. The mace came down hard on its back, the runes flashing briefly with light. The beast roared in pain but did not fall. Instead, it spun around, eyes burning with fury. The black-furred predator seized the opening, leaping at Ethan from behind. He heard the rush of air just in time and swung the mace upward. The weapon connected mid-leap, the impact sending the creature sprawling across the sand. The crowd erupted, some rising to their feet. Ethan could feel their energy. They wanted a show, and he was giving them one. From the platform, Varakai watched closely. Her golden eyes did not leave him. She had seen many warriors from her own people fail this stage, and yet this human fought as though the weight of the mace was part of him. Something about the way he moved told her he wasn't just surviving, he was adapting. The horned beast lowered its head and charged again. This time Ethan didn't dodge. He planted his feet, gripping the mace with both hands. At the last second, he swung it sideways with all his strength. The blow connected with the side of the beast's head, and for a moment, the arena seemed to go silent. Then the beast crashed to the ground. Unmoving, the black-furred predator hesitated, its glowing eyes flickering with uncertainty. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing. In his shoulders burned. His forearms felt like they were on fire. Still, he raised the mace again. The predator growled low but did not rush him. It circled, looking for weakness. Ethan shifted his stance, refusing to give it the opening it wanted. The crowd began stomping their feet, the ground trembling beneath him. He realized they weren't cheering for his defeat anymore. They were daring him to win. The predator lunged suddenly, claws outstretched. Ethan twisted his body, swinging the mace in a tight arc. The weapon smashed into the predator's side, sending it tumbling across the arena until it slid to a stop motionless. The arena fell, silent for just a heartbeat before erupting in thunderous noise. Some shouted in shock, others in wild approval. Ethan lowered the mace, his chest heaving. He had survived the second stage of the trial, but he knew this wasn't over. The Korath didn't believe in easy victories. Varakai raised her hand for silence, her voice cutting through the chaos. "The outsider has endured the beasts," she said, her tone carrying an edge of respect. "But strength alone does not earn the right to carry the mace." She pointed toward the far gate, which was slowly beginning to open. Darkness poured from within, thick and heavy. Ethan narrowed his eyes, unsure of what was coming. From the shadows he heard a sound unlike any beast before, It was low, almost a whisper, but it made the hair on his neck rise. The crowd hushed, leaning forward. Whatever was inside that gate was not just another animal. It was something else, something meant to break even the strongest warrior. Ethan shifted his stance, tightening his grip on the mace. Every instinct told him that whatever stepped out next would decide if he walked out of this arena alive. But he also felt something else, a spark of determination. The same stubborn fire that had kept him holding this impossible weapon from the start. If the Korath wanted to see how far a human could go, he was ready to show them. The first betrayal, the dark gate yawned open like the mouth of some ancient cave, and from its depths came a slow, echoing sound. It was not the roar of a beast, nor the growl of hunger. It was the sound of metal scraping against stone, steady and deliberate. Ethan gripped the war mace tighter, his eyes locked on the shifting shadows. The crowd had gone silent, their earlier cheers fading into tense whispers. Then it appeared. A tall, armored figure stepped into the light, its black plates jagged like the edges of a broken blade. Its eyes glowed a deep crimson, and in its hands it carried a massive spear tipped with serrated edges. This was no beast, this was a warrior, and judging by the way the crowd reacted, it was one of their finest. Varakai's voice rang out above the silence. "Raztor, champion of the Korath," she declared. Ethan's brow furrowed, so this was the next trial. The warrior advanced slowly, the ground seeming to tremble beneath his steps. His movements were smooth, controlled, like someone who knew exactly how to kill. Ethan adjusted his stance. He was ready to fight, but something in the air felt wrong. A faint metallic scent reached his nose. It wasn't blood, it was oil, fresh oil, dripping faintly from the mace's grip. Someone had coated it, making it harder to hold. His fingers shifted slightly on the handle, feeling the slickness, sabotage. The realization hit him fast. Someone didn't just want him to lose. They wanted him dead, if the mace slipped from his hands even once. The Korath would call it failure. And against an armed warrior like Raztor, that would be the end. Ethan kept his face calm, hiding his discovery. He couldn't let them know he had noticed. Raztor's crimson eyes narrowed. As he spoke in the Korath tongue, Ethan didn't understand the words, but the tone carried contempt. It didn't matter. The meaning was clear enough. This warrior didn't see him as an equal, only as prey. The first attack came fast. Raztor's spear swept low, aiming for Ethan's legs. Ethan jumped back, the mace heavy but still under his control. The slick grip made every swing a risk, but he adjusted by locking his wrists harder. He countered with a wide arc, the weapon whistling through the air. Raztor blocked it easily, his strength nearly matching the mace's weight. The crowd roared with every clash of weapon against weapon. Ethan could feel the sting in his palms. The oil was slowly working its way between his fingers. He had only minutes before the grip became too dangerous. He switched tactics. Instead of meeting Raztor's strength head-on, he began to move faster, shorter swings, quicker strikes, forcing the warrior to defend instead of attack. The crowd's cheers shifted. Some now began to shout his name, others yelled for Raztor too. "Finish him!" From the platform, Varakai's golden eyes never left the fight. Her expression was unreadable, but her fingers tapped lightly against the railing. It was a small gesture, but Ethan caught it. She had noticed the oil. Whether she would stop the fight or not was another question. Raztor suddenly lunged forward, his spear aiming straight for Ethan's chest. Ethan twisted sideways, the tip grazing his armor. Using the momentum, he swung the mace low, striking Raztor's knee with a loud crack. The warrior staggered but did not fall. Instead, he snarled, shifting his weight and ramming his shoulder into Ethan. The impact nearly knocked the mace from his hands. The oil-slicked grip slid under his palms. For one terrifying second, he felt it slipping, but he tightened his fingers until they burned, holding on. The crowd gasped. Raztor stepped back, watching him with a predator's focus. Ethan knew he was being studied. The champion was looking for the moment when his grip would finally fail. Ethan's breathing grew heavier, His arms were screaming, but his mind was sharper than ever. This wasn't just a trial of strength anymore. It was a game of endurance and control. He waited, letting Raztor think he was tiring. When the warrior lunged again, Ethan ducked low, spinning under the spear. With every ounce of force he had left, he swung the mace upward. The weapon slammed into Raztor's chest plate, the runes flaring with bright light. The champion stumbled back, air blasting from his lungs. The crowd exploded into chaos, half cheering, half shouting in rage. Raztor fell to one knee, but instead of surrendering, he slammed the butt of his spear into the ground and rose again. This fight was not over, and Ethan could see in his eyes the next strike would be meant to kill. From somewhere in the crowd, a shadow moved. A cloaked figure melted back into the masses, unseen by most. But Ethan caught it, the faint glint of an oil canister in their hand. Whoever they were, they had been close enough to sabotage the mace before the trial began, and if they had allies, this fight might not be as fair as it looked. Ethan readjusted his stance. The betrayal had been made clear. Now it was not only about survival, it was about finding out who wanted him dead, and why. Bond of honor. The sound of the crowd's roar faded into the background as Ethan steadied himself. The war mace still heavy in his hands, Raztor circled him slowly. His crimson eyes locked on the human like a predator measuring its prey. The slickness from the oil still coated the grip, each movement threatening to loosen Ethan's hold. Every muscle in his arms burned, but he refused to loosen his stance. He would rather fall on his feet than drop the weapon in shame. From above, Varakai watched with an expression carved from stone. Her people would see only the war chief judging the trial, but in her mind, something was shifting. The human had not only endured the beasts but now stood toe-to-toe with one of her best warriors despite clear sabotage. That stubbornness, that refusal to yield, it stirred something she had not felt in years. The fight resumed with a clash that sent sparks into the air. Raztor's spear and Ethan's mace collided again and again, each strike louder than the last. Ethan's breath grew heavier, but his eyes never left his opponent. He knew one mistake here would mean death. And yet, out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of movement in the stands. The same cloaked figure from before, slipping away toward the gates. The saboteur. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to break the fight and pursue, but doing so would mean failing the trial, and failing meant losing any chance to find out who was behind this. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the warrior in front of him. Raztor lunged again, his spear aimed for Ethan's head. Ethan ducked low, swinging the mace in a tight arc. The weapon slammed into Raztor's shin, forcing the warrior to stumble. The crowd gasped, some shouting for blood, others roaring in approval. Varakai raised a hand, and the noise dimmed just enough for her voice to carry. "Outsider," she called, her golden eyes piercing down at him. Ethan looked up briefly, not letting his guard down. "You fight with strength, but not only with strength," she said. "There is honor in that." It was the first time since his arrival that she had spoken to him with something other than challenge. The words struck something in Ethan. Honor. That was a language he understood. He gave her a short nod, his chest tightening with determination. Raztor snarled and attacked again, but this time Ethan met the blow head-on. The mace rang against the spear. The shock of impact running up his arms, he pushed forward, step by step, until Raztor's back hit the arena wall. With one last swing, Ethan sent the spear flying from the warrior's grip. It landed in the sand several paces away. The arena fell silent for a heartbeat. Ethan stood over Raztor, the mace raised high. He could end it now. The crowd expected it. Raztor himself braced for it. But Ethan hesitated. Killing the warrior would win the trial, but it would not win him the truth about who wanted him dead. Slowly he lowered the mace. The silence in the arena deepened, and then a single voice shouted from the stands, not in the Korath tongue, but in heavily accented English, "Coward." Ethan's eyes snapped toward the voice. But the speaker was already lost in the crowd. The insult didn't sting. What did sting was the confirmation. There was more than one person here who understood his language. The saboteur might not be the only human on this planet. Varakai rose from her platform and stepped down into the arena, the warriors guarding. Her parted as she approached. Her boots left deep marks in the sand as she stopped in front of Ethan. She studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You could have taken his life," she said. "Why didn't you?" Ethan met her gaze. Without flinching. "Because strength without mercy is just brutality," he replied. Her golden eyes narrowed slightly, as if testing the weight of his words. Finally, she gave a slow nod. The crowd murmured, confused by her approval. She turned to face them, raising her voice. "The outsider has passed this stage of the trial," she declared. "But the trial is not over." Her tone sharpened. "And it seems not all among us fight with honor." The crowd rippled with tension, some warriors exchanging uneasy glances. The accusation was clear. Someone had interfered, and in the Korath, that was a grave offense. Varakai's eyes flicked briefly toward the gate where the cloaked figure had disappeared, then back to Ethan. "You fight again at dawn," she told him, this time not against beasts or warriors. Her voice dropped lower, so only he could hear. But against truth itself. Ethan didn't fully understand her meaning, but he felt the weight behind the words. The next trial would not just test his body, it would test his place among them. And somewhere in the shadows of this city, his unseen enemy was waiting. Shadows in the tribe. The trial ended before sunset, but the air inside the Korath stronghold felt heavier than the red skies above. Ethan was escorted through the towering gates by 2 silent guards, the war mace still in his grip. Every step echoed against the stone halls. Each beat of his boots a reminder that he was walking deeper into the heart of alien territory. He could feel eyes on him from the shadows, not the curious gaze of spectators, but the cold focus of watchers who had already decided what he should be. An intruder, a threat. The guards stopped before a wide chamber lit by fire pits. Inside, warriors sat in a loose circle, speaking in low voices at the far end. Varakai stood over a map carved into the stone floor, her fingers tracing the markings. She looked up when Ethan entered, her expression unreadable. "You will rest here tonight," she said, her voice steady. "But know this. Tomorrow's trial will not be as simple as swinging a weapon." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I figured that out when someone tried to make sure I dropped it," he replied. The corners of her eyes tightened, not in surprise but in acknowledgement. "Restor fought with honor," she said. "Yet the weapon was tampered with. This dishonors us all." The warriors around the fire glanced at each other, but said nothing. Ethan knew this silence well. It was the kind that came when the guilty were sitting in the same room as the innocent. He could almost feel the tension pulsing like heat. Varakai dismissed the guards and gestured for him to follow her. They stepped into a side corridor, away from the circle of firelight. "There are factions here," she said quietly. "Some believe no outsider should stand in the arena, no matter their strength." Ethan tilted his head. "And you? What do you believe?" Her gaze was steady. "I believe in what I see," she answered. "And I have seen you fight with strength, mercy, and will, traits worth respecting." Her words carried a weight he didn't fully understand. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a thread. Thin and fragile, that might hold if he didn't break it. Before he could respond, a shadow moved at the far end of the corridor. Varakai saw it too. She shifted her stance, her hand brushing the hilt of her blade. The shadow slipped away without a sound. "That," she said, her voice low, "was no warrior of mine." Later that night, Ethan lay on a stone bench in the guest chamber they had given him. The walls were bare, the only light a flickering torch outside the door. He kept the war mace propped beside him. Its weight a strange comfort. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the stronghold, every gust of wind through the stone arches kept him alert. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. Near midnight, a faint scrape broke the stillness. Ethan's eyes opened instantly. The sound came again, from above. He rolled silently to his feet, gripping the mace. A figure dropped from the high beams, landing softly on the floor. It was the cloaked saboteur, their face hidden in shadow. They froze when they saw him awake. Neither moved for a heartbeat. Then, in a voice low and strange, the figure spoke in accented English. "You should have died in the arena." Ethan stepped forward, the mace balanced in both hands. "Guess I ruined your plan," he said. The figure's head tilted. "You still will, tomorrow," they replied. Then they turned and darted for the window slit in the wall. Ethan lunged. But they were fast, too fast, slipping into the night before he could grab them. The sound of boots running in the corridor came next. Varakai burst into the room with 2 warriors at her side. She saw the open window and the look in Ethan's eyes. "They came here," she said. Her voice tense. Ethan nodded. "And they spoke to me, in my language." Her golden eyes widened slightly. "That should be impossible," she muttered. Ethan shook his head. "Unless I'm not the only human on this planet." For a moment, silence filled the room. The firelight flickered across Varakai's face, revealing something Ethan hadn't seen before. Not suspicion, not judgment, but concern. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Tomorrow's trial is more than a test of strength," she said. "It is a judgment before the elders, and if what you say is true, then your enemies will not only try to make you fail, they will try to erase you." Ethan tightened his grip on the mace. He had survived beasts, warriors, and sabotage. But the next trial would be fought not just with muscle and steel. It would be fought against lies, politics, and the hidden hands in the shadows. And if another human was truly out there, working against him, then this was no longer just a trial, it was a hunt. The final clash. The dawn over Varkesh was blood red. The twin suns rising like 2 watchful eyes above the horizon. The great arena was already alive with the roar of the crowd. Today's trial had been whispered about all night, spreading through the Korath city like fire in dry grass. The outsider's final test. Some said he would face the strongest warrior in the tribe. Others claimed the war chief herself would strike him down. But the most dangerous rumor was the quietest, that the trial would decide whether he walked out alive at all. Ethan stood at the center of the arena. The war mace balanced in his hands. The weapon's weight felt almost natural now, his body having grown used to the strain, but his mind was sharper than ever. The memory of the cloaked saboteur's voice still echoed in his head. "You should have died in the arena." "Tomorrow you will." The gates on the far side creaked open. Instead of a beast or an armored champion, a group of 7 warriors emerged, their armor gleaming under the rising light. Each carried a different weapon: spear, blade, chain, staff, axe, shield, and bow. Ethan felt the crowd's hunger for spectacle in the way their voices rose. 7 against 1. This wasn't a fight. It was an execution dressed as a trial. From the high platform, Varakai raised her voice. "This is the judgment of worth," she declared. "Defeat your challengers, and you will walk among the Korath as one of us." Her gaze locked on him, the words heavier than they sounded. "Fail, and your name will be erased." The warriors spread out in a circle, closing around him like a tightening noose. Ethan took a slow breath. The saboteur had chosen this moment to make sure he didn't survive, and if they were watching from the shadows, then exposing them here in front of the entire tribe was his only chance. The first attack came from the warrior with the chain. Ethan sidestepped, swinging the mace low, smashing the chain's weight to the ground. The next was the archer, loosing 2 arrows in quick succession. Ethan deflected one with the mace's shaft and ducked the other. Rolling forward, the spear wielder stepped in to block his path. Thrusting hard, Ethan caught the spear under the mace's head and wrenched it aside, sending the warrior stumbling back. The crowd roared, their chants splitting between awe and bloodlust. But Ethan wasn't only watching his attackers, he was scanning the stands. And then he saw it. In the upper tiers, a hooded figure moved among the cheering warriors, their head bent low. Even from here, He recognized the tilt of the shoulders. The saboteur. He forced himself not to break focus. If he charged into the crowd, he'd be cut down by the arena guards. No, he had to bring the saboteur into the fight. And that meant staying alive long enough for them to make their move. The shield bearer slammed into him hard, driving him back toward the center. Ethan used the momentum, pivoting and smashing the mace into the side of the shield. The impact rang like a gong, staggering the warrior. The one with the axe charged in, swinging low. Ethan jumped aside, the blade slicing the air where his legs had been. He countered with a sharp upward swing, knocking the axe from their grip. The crowd's excitement grew with every strike. But Ethan could feel the circle tightening. The 7 warriors were now moving as one, driving him into a trap. And then it happened. A glint of metal flashed from the upper tiers, a small, thin blade, thrown toward the arena floor. It landed with a faint clink, right between the feet of the chain wielder. The warrior glanced down, then snatched it up without hesitation. Ethan's stomach twisted. That wasn't an arena-issued blade. It was the same black steel he had seen in the saboteur's hand the night before. This was his proof. The chain wielder lunged at him, now armed with the poisoned blade. Ethan blocked the strike with the mace, knocking the blade from their hand. It skittered across the sand toward the arena's edge. Without thinking, Ethan drove forward, forcing the warrior back. Then he turned toward the platform, his voice cutting through the noise. "Warchief!" He shouted, Varakai's head tilted, her golden eyes narrowing. "This fight is poisoned." He called, "Your trial has been corrupted." The crowd murmured, their chants breaking apart into confusion. Varakai raised a hand, and the warriors froze in place. Ethan stepped to the fallen blade, lifting it high for all to see. "This weapon came from outside the trial," he said. "And I think your saboteur is still here." Gasps rippled through the stands. Varakai's gaze swept over the crowd like a hunting hawk. In the upper tiers, the hooded figure tried to slip away. "Seize them!" Varakai commanded. Warriors surged toward the figure, dragging them into the open. When the hood was torn away, the arena erupted in shouts. The saboteur was not a human, but a Korath elder, one of the council who had argued against Ethan's trials from the beginning. Varakai's face hardened. "You sought to dishonor the trials," she said, her voice cold, "and to spill blood without honor." Ethan lowered the mace, his chest heaving. The fight wasn't over, but now it was no longer just about survival. It was about proving that strength, will, and honor could shatter even the deepest treachery. A new tradition. The arena was still trembling with the weight of the crowds. Voices, warriors dragged the disgraced elder to the center, forcing him to his knees before Varakai. The warchief's golden eyes burned with a controlled fury, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "You dishonored the Korath," she said. "You sought to kill not with skill, but with poison and deceit." The elder tried to speak, but the roar of the crowd drowned him out. The people had seen the truth for themselves. The thrown blade, the sabotage, the betrayal. This was no longer just about Ethan. It was about the honor of the trials themselves. Varakai lifted a hand, and the noise slowly faded. She turned toward Ethan, still standing in the arena's center, the war mace resting across his shoulders. "You came here as an outsider," she said, her tone firm. "You faced the beasts, the warriors, and the shadows within our own ranks. You held the mace when none thought you could." Ethan's chest rose and fell with the weight of the moment. His arms still ached from the fight. His body screamed for rest. But he met her gaze without looking away. He had come this far, not because he wanted their respect, but because he refused to bend when someone told him it was impossible. Varakai stepped down from the platform, walking slowly toward him. Her footsteps were deliberate, each one echoing in the heavy silence. When she stood before him, she reached for the war mace. The crowd held its breath. Tradition said she would take it from him now, keeping it as a symbol of his victory. But instead, she pushed it back into his hands. "From this day," she said loudly enough for all to hear, "the Trial of the Mace will no longer be closed to outsiders. If they have the strength, the will, and the honor, they may stand as equals. The crowd erupted into shouts, some in support, others in shock. The Korath had never changed this tradition in generations. Ethan stood still, feeling the weight of her words sink in. This wasn't just his victory. It was the start of something larger. Varakai turned toward the disgraced elder. "For your crime, you are exiled beyond the Crimson Ridges," she declared. "You will not carry the name of Korath again." The guards hauled him away, his voice lost under the thunder of the people. When the Warchief faced Ethan again, her tone shifted. "You fight like one of us," she said, "but you also fight like something else, something your kind carries that we do not." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "And what's that?" Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "Defiance without end." The crowd began to chant his name. At first, it was uneven, scattered. Then it grew into a rhythm that shook the arena walls. Ethan Cross. Ethan Cross. For a moment, he let himself breathe. The war mace no longer felt like a burden in his hands. It felt like it belonged there, not because it was given to him, but because he had earned it. As the crowd celebrated, Varakai leaned closer, her voice low enough for only him to hear. "The saboteur you saw," she said. "They were not acting alone." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "How do you know?" Her gaze swept the stands, because some cheered when they were unmasked, and others went silent. He understood immediately. Today's victory had not ended the danger. It had only marked him as a bigger target, but now he had something more than survival. He had allies, even if one of them was a towering alien warrior who could break him in half. As the suns began to set, their light painting the arena in gold and crimson, Varakai raised his arm before the crowd. "This human," she announced, "is no longer just an outsider. He is Ethan Cross of the Korath." The crowd roared again, some in acceptance, others in protest. But the tradition had been changed. The path forward was no longer closed. Ethan looked around at the sea of alien faces, the sound of their voices rolling over him like a wave. Somewhere in that crowd, he knew, were the ones who still wanted him dead. But there were also those who had seen what he could do, and maybe, just maybe, they would stand with him when the next storm came. For now, he let the roar of the arena wash over him, the war mace heavy in his hands, the knowledge of his place earned, not given, burning in his chest. A human had stepped into the heart of the Korath and changed it forever, and he wasn't done yet.